Hello, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. We hope you had a good week, as we hope the American people had a chance to celebrate with family. My name is Xavier Becerra, Congressman Becerra. I am the chairman of the House Democratic Caucus. I'm pleased to be joined by the Vice Chairman, Joe Crowley of New York, our ranking member on the Appropriations Committee, Nita Lowey from New York, and joining us as well, my colleague and friend from California, Eric Swalwell. I'm going to turn it over to the Vice Chair, and the Vice Chair will then ask Mr. Swalwell to make some remarks because we had a special guest today. Governor Martin O'Malley from Maryland came and spoke to the members of the Democratic Caucus about his efforts to become the next President of the United States. And then we want to move then to our ranking member from Appropriations, Ms. Lowey, to give us some information on where things stand on the efforts to make sure we don't see another government prayers, as I said, go out to them. Speaker Ryan started his speakership less than a month ago, essentially saying that he wanted to start with a clean slate. He wanted to turn the page so we could move forward. And we have many deadlines to cover in the next few days, quite honestly. There are no more than about 6 legislative days before we must have a budget in place. Otherwise, the government would shut down. The difficulty is this. Speaker Boehner, who was forced out by his Republican colleagues, essentially helped clear the deck for the next and new speaker, Mr. Ryan. The difficulty is on the things that matter most to Americans, we're seeing very little, unfortunately, being done. We continue to take action on the floor of the House to have moments of silence when we see these mass killings, but we take no votes to try to close the loopholes that exist in our gun safety laws. We haven't had a chance to vote on a bill that would let us have a universal background check of anyone who wishes to possess a gun to make sure that they are not mentally unfit or aren't criminals and felons. We are, as I said, 6 days away from, as much as we would like to see a clean slate moving forward so we can do things, what we're finding is that the budget bill may be littered with all sorts of social agendas that have nothing to do with the fiscal requirements of our country to move forward. And so we would like to see a clean budget bill move forward, not littered with so many things that have nothing to do with the fiscal demands of our government and our economy. We'd like to make sure that we clear the decks and finally get on the books a bill that will let our cities and our towns and our counties go back to the business of rebuilding roads, fixing bridges, improving schools. But it's tough when we can't get the transportation infrastructure bill out of Congress. And so there are a lot of things that we need to do. We'd like to help Speaker Ryan maintain a clearing of the decks so we can get going, but we got to do this the right way. We got to do it cleanly, and we're hoping that we can take action, not just on gun safety, not just on a budget, not just on transportation, better roads and bridges so we can get to work on time, but dealing with all the issues that confront us, including security, national security, and the threat of global warming, climate change, and carbon pollution, which could endanger all of us, and certainly our kids and our grandkids. With that, let me turn it over to the Vice Chair, Joe Crowley.
Thank you, Chairman Becerra. Let me first thank you for remembering the victims of gun violence once again in Colorado, whether it be in a mall, in a theater, in a school, and now in a health clinic. These acts of violence ought not to be taking place. These acts of terrorism ought not to be happening in the United States. It's time for people on all sides of this issue to come together, maybe in a select committee. It'd be nice if the Speaker of the House would call a select committee to deal with the issue of gun violence and gun terrorism here in the United States. I won't hold my breath for that, but it'd be maybe a good time to do that. So all people of goodwill on all sides come together to find real solutions to tackle this issue that we're all facing in America today. And our thoughts and prayers continue to go out to the people of Paris and as well as Lebanon as they recoup from the most recent terrorist attacks within those countries. And we applaud the efforts that the President is making in Paris as he works towards tackling the global issue of climate change. But here we are in the act before it is too late session. Once again, we're back to governing by crisis to crisis, man-made fiscal cliffs, man-made crises. December 11th is now our most recent deadline. And I concur wholeheartedly with the chairman in all the myriad of issues that need to be done before we leave this year and have a clean slate, as Speaker Ryan has talked about, for next year. One of the issues that's very close to me, as well as I know Chairwoman Lowey, is the issue of the Zadroga Act, the 9/11 Victims' Health and Victims' Compensation Bill. We were led to believe that there was a strong possibility that that would be included in the transportation bill that we expect will be filed today and voted on as early as Thursday, only to be told that it's no longer a part of that legislation. I don't care how it gets done. This act needs to be reenacted. Too many people are facing this holiday season, facing long-term, debilitating, life-threatening diseases because of their exposure to what was known as the pile, the rubble, ground zero after the attacks of 9/11. The events of that day continue to have effect not only in New York but around our country as well. People who gave all, ran into those buildings to save lives, find themselves now suffering with incredibly debilitating diseases. This Congress, before we continue to say we never forget, we actually cannot forget these men and women who are suffering. Not let another year go by without them understanding whether or not they will have health care coverage to cover the costs and needs that they are facing as they struggle with stage 4 cancers as well as other debilitating diseases. And before I turn the microphone over, I just want to also mention it was great to see this morning an old friend in Governor Martin O'Malley. Our families have a long history, go back a couple of decades. And it's great to hear his thoughts about his positioning as he runs for President of the United States. I have great admiration for him. But here to speak about what the governor spoke about this morning is Eric Swalwell, his chief cheerleader in the House of Representatives today.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Chair. We will, I expect, this week have another moment of silence for victims of gun violence. And sadly, that moment of silence will not be followed by any moments of action under this House Republican leadership. And moments of silence, while they honor the dead, if we remain silent after acts like this occurred, they are just empty gestures. And it's hard to stand on the floor of the House of Representatives when this happens, to look around and wonder which of your colleagues will stand in the well next week when someone in their community falls victim to a mass shooting. And if there's any pattern, it's that it could be a Republican, it could be a Democrat, it could be from the East Coast, it could be from the West Coast, it could be from the Midwest or the South. But there will be somebody in the coming weeks who will stand on the floor to honor people in their community who have died until we do something about it. I had the honor today to introduce my friend and someone I'm supporting for president, Governor Martin O'Malley. And he demonstrates the courage that we need from this House Republican leadership in the actions that he has taken to address gun violence. As the governor of Maryland, after the terrible tragedy in Newtown, he helped marshal through some of the most sweeping gun violence measures any state has taken, from universal background checks to licensing and fingerprinting to also limits on ammunition purchases. He is also calling to reduce gun violence by 50% over the next 10 years, setting a clear deadline and a goal for our country to aspire to, but also meet, so that these types of tragedies do not continue to haunt and hurt people in our country. And with that, I'd be happy to introduce someone who can talk about what's going to present itself in the days and weeks ahead before we convene here, our ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Lowey.
Thank you very much. Over the past several weeks, appropriators on both sides of the aisle have been working together, trying to focus on investing in our economy, building our roads, bridges, dealing with climate, dealing with all the challenges that we have to make sure that our communities are strong. Time is not on our side. We're hoping we can complete the process by the designated date, which was December 11th. And as we move forward, we will continue to stress investments and not certainly deal with the poison pills that some have been advocating. So as the process moves forward, I'm hoping we can all get together and talk about the real investments that are making our country strong, and that they will be reflected in the appropriations process.
We'll take questions.
Congressman, one of the items that NCLR and other civic groups are calling for is renewing the tax credits. Can you give us the lay of the land in terms of what's going on with those tax credits for low-income families? And also, what are your expectations with all the different issues that you raised today, that they will be passed, by the end of the year?
Well, they're ongoing discussions, as Ms. Lowey mentioned. We know it's very fluid. There is no solution yet, no resolution, I should say, to any of these things, whether it's the budget side of this discussion or the tax side of the discussion. But we know that there are ongoing discussions. It would be speculation for me to say more than that, but you've heard, as we've heard, any number of ideas that are out there, any number of items that would be proposed, but it'd be unrealistic for us to, at this point, give you some kind of concrete idea of where this will go. I do believe that it's fair to say that most of us want to make sure that whatever we do will help, as Ms. Lowey said, help us create more jobs, expand the economy, and do it in a way that's fiscally responsible. So all of us, I believe, here in the House and in the Senate are waiting to see if there will be something that we can vote for rather than just see something we have to vote against.
Can I just add to that, as also a member of the Ways and Means Committee with Chairman Becerra? The Democratic Caucus, our priorities are the Earned Income Tax Credit. Our priorities are the Americans' Opportunities Tax Credit. We think that's the right thing to do to help the struggling middle class and the working poor in this country. That's what we expect to see happen at some point. Now, it may very well be that it goes back to another 2-year extender or 1 year retroactively, and maybe 1 year going forward. We don't know yet. So, but I think it's important. I think, as the chairman stressed, what the values of our caucus are reflective in what our priorities are in terms of these negotiations, and those are the things that we put first.
On that note, the Nicole Hudson bill was supported by a quarter of your conference. Is that still considered a poison pill if something similar was attached to the omnibus, when it did have at least would have been a veto-proof majority if the Republicans who were absent voted?
And Nita, you may want to respond to some of this as well. I would just say that the president's made it very clear what we need to do with regard to having a tough regime in place, a tough process in place for anyone to come into this country. And the fact that so few Syrians have made it through the refugee process makes it very clear that the process is extremely difficult for anyone to go through, especially if you're a male adult. And so my sense is that when you start talking about inserting things that are controversial into a fiscal and essential bill that could lead to a government shutdown unless we get the work done, we're going to experience what we did just a few years ago when Republicans tried to shut down the Affordable Care Act through the budget bill. I think that Ms. Lowey can respond best, but I think we're trying to avoid seeing the government shut down because people are trying to foist their agenda onto a budget bill.
I guess my question is, how willing are Democrats to go to the
Why don't we, Lauren, let me ask Nita. to
Well,
respond
I
to this.
just want to say the chairman answered your question very thoughtfully, and we've moved beyond that bill, frankly. Not only the president, but Democrats and some Republicans are talking about reforming the visa waiver program. There are people coming into our country on the visa waiver program that is a concern to all of us. We're also concerned about homegrown potential terrorists here. So that bill had a vote, it's passed. I don't expect it will be part of the appropriations process. We have serious work to do on appropriations. If we're going to continue to invest in our economy, build a strong economy, invest in our schools, our roads, our bridges, creating jobs, then we have to make sure those investments are included in part of an appropriations bill, and poison pills aren't bogging them down. And the continuing discussions, I would hope, would result in a constructive appropriations bill, a constructive omnibus that will represent the values of the American people.
Let me say that the passage of the McCall Act was not one of the finest moments in the history of the House of Representatives, and I think history will show that to be true. I've been saying that it takes longer to change a post office name than it did to pass that bill. Note the president was out of the country when that bill was initiated and then ultimately passed in the House of Representatives. I think it's a diversion. I think they think they're onto something. You know, the horrific attack in Paris and in Lebanon, let's not forget, as I think the president has said, has created a level of fear throughout the world, but particularly here in the United States. Our response needs to be a thoughtful response. And I think this is a diversion. And somehow, if we somehow stop these refugees, these women and children, these older people from coming into the United States who, if they stay in their country, many of whom face death, rape, and torture. Not necessarily in that order, death being the ultimate consequence for many of them. That speaks poorly of our country, if that's the case. But quite frankly, it is a diversion from really tackling the issue, as Ms. Lowey said. The visa waiver program is something that I don't think we should stop, but that and I'm grateful that the president is taking steps and actions now, thoughtful steps and actions, to beef that up. Because I do think that that is a vulnerability that we have within the present program. But secondly, and I think Nita touched on this, there is a tremendous loophole in the United States. There is a terrorism watch list that exists. We have this terrorism watch list. Justice has it. Homeland Security has it. And yet, because of the laws of this country, we cannot have background checks when those individuals, if those individuals attempt to purchase a weapon in the United States. Now, isn't that something we should try to close? Who reasonably thinks we should not deny weapons to terrorists who want to destroy our way of life? Who could reasonably argue against that? And yet, there was no discussion. That bill was never brought to the floor. There was no hearing on that legislation at all. If we want to really address the issue of homegrown terrorism, as well as the threat of international terrorism here in the United States, that's a productive way to begin to address this issue. But there is no courage on the other side of the aisle to bring that bill up, because we know that's a tough bill to pass. But I think if we did do that, we'd make remarkable improvement in terms of securing our homeland.
Lauren, did you want to follow up?
Yeah.
Okay. Mike?
Same topic. You said that the McCall bill will not be a part of the omnibus. Do you see that issue being part of the omnibus? And the visa waiver, do you want to provide?
Oh, there are a lot of discussions, so anything can be part of the omnibus if there's Democratic and Republican agreement. I just wanted to make it clear that McCall bill is old news now. And frankly, any Syrian refugee that wanted to come to the States wouldn't come here in a more than 24-month period. So we move on to the visa waiver program, and that should be the focus. I'm concerned about homegrown terrorists, thousands of people who go to Syria, go to Afghanistan, go to Libya, get trained, want to come back, could travel here from Paris, Italy, any place else. It's the visa waiver program is key. We've moved past the McCall bill.
Yes.
Senator Ryan this morning has mentioned the Murphy mental health bill as a potential response to the shooting in Colorado. It's
What'd he
still
say?
a Democratic Party subsidy, but can you
What bill? Can you
Murphy.
Oh,
Yeah,
Mental health.
you know what? Something very unfortunate happened with that bill. It started off as a bipartisan bill. And then, as Ms. Lowey can tell you with regard to the appropriations bills that she's saying, something very interesting happens. Those bills, before they get to the floor of the House for a vote, get stripped of the bipartisan portions of the bill, and they become very, very partisan. And it's unfortunate because I think all of us would agree that something we can do pretty immediately to provide gun safety to America and to all Americans is not just having a universal background check for those who wish to secure a gun, but to have a beefed up mental health system to be able to find and provide the assistance, the mental health services that people need, so that we don't let them get their hands on weapons when they're not in a mental state that would allow them to make good judgments. That bill, the Murphy bill, has become unfortunately, a partisan bill when it could have been a totally bipartisan bill, and that's unfortunate because we need to get things done. And if the Speaker wants to fulfill that pledge of having a clean slate and moving forward together, then he should put back the bipartisan portions of that bill so we can have a bipartisan vote to help Americans be safe.
By the way, if we're talking about bipartisanship, the bill was referenced several times, the terrorism watch list. I've introduced it over and over again in the Appropriations Committee. Unfortunately, it hasn't gotten bipartisan support.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just going back to Governor O'Malley's visit, did he set up any specific policy differences between himself and Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders in the room? And just generally speaking, sort of, how was his message received by the caucus?
Governor O'Malley spoke first about his record as a governor of Maryland, as the mayor of Baltimore, but also just about the young people he has spoken to across the country and the message he believes they're waiting for, which is one of new leadership and getting things done. And he believes for our party, and I believe the same, people are hungry for that right now. They're hungry for a new leader who is proven, who has a progressive record of actually accomplishing stuff that he has done in Maryland. And the list is from the DREAM Act to same-sex marriage to reducing gun violence to also increasing the minimum and having a living wage there. So he put forward his accomplishments, his aspirations as president, and we'll leave it to members of the caucus and the people in the country to draw the distinctions.
And I'll mention that not only was he well received, he received a standing ovation and quite a bit of applause. And so he's considered a great friend, a great Democrat, and one of the best governors that we've seen in quite some time. So I think all of us were thrilled and pleased that he took the time to visit with us and give us more words about his leadership and what he would do for this country. With that, we'll close, and we all thank you very much.
Are you going to be making an announcement and there's two endorsements like yesterday in the Senate with Secretary Clinton, several Democratic senators?
We'll leave that to the candidates to do. Thank you.